Hey everybody, Tim Norris here, aka GreyElephant.
And Carmen Norris.
And welcome to another edition of Games You Might Not Be Playing,
But should.
Today we're going to talk about Tash, Kalar by Z-Man Games.
Oh, but I'm just really not in the mood for another Euro-style game.
Ah, but it's not a Euro.
Well, I'm not in the mood for deck building either.
It's not a deck builder.
Worker placement doesn't sound any fun.
No, worker placement, that goes back to Euro.
I'm not really hip for skirmish-type games with dice rolling.
Ah, have we got a treat for you. Okay, so let's talk about the setup of Tash Kalar, but before I get into that, I need to make note that there are 4 different ways to play this game, and what we're going to show you is called the high form. Ooh, pinky out. This fashion here is where you try to set up patterns on the board in order to score points to match cards, and we'll explain how that works in a second. Now, if you want to know how the other version of the game works, which is the death match, watch our live play where Carmen and I played an entire game. That's the death match. This is a little different. Now, the other 2 ways to play the game involve more players than just 2, so we're not going to get into too much detail on that. Alright, so let's take a look at the player board itself. Alright, this is the side you're going to use for the high form, okay? Because there are 2 sides to this board. This side has a couple of diamonds and diamonds there, and this one has like this brown outline around this red dots, and it's got these little lines going here. So you know that this is the high form side, okay? Each player then is going to get 20 pieces to represent their color, okay? 3 of these are going to be for legendary, and then the other 17 are going to be for normal, and I'll explain the difference how that works here in just a minute. Each player is going to pick their faction. Now, for your first game, they recommend that you just take, there's 2 factions that are exactly the same, and they're like called the North and the South, I think Imperial North and South. Each player will take that set of cards and place them down in front of themselves. Notice red, red, blue, blue. Next, you're going to set up the little area here, and this is where we're going to score our points from, okay? And what you're going to do is you're going to draw the first 3 cards, flip them over, and then you're going to look up here in these little corners and see if any of them match. And if they do, then you would actually discard it and pick another one. And there's also some other advanced ones. And if you look at this, notice how it has that watermark with like the skull and crossbone. None of these have it. But if any of these did, then you would discard it and pull a new one out as well. Flip over the top one as well, and now we've got our little score area set up, and we'll explain how that works in just a second. Now let's go back down here to the actual board itself. Each player is going to draw 3 cards from their faction deck. So if you come over here and take a look at my faction deck, I will draw 1, 2, 3. This is my starting characters in my hand. Next, I'm going to draw 2 cards from the legend deck. The legend deck is this yellow one, so 1, 2. Add that to what I've already drawn from my faction deck. Next, I'm going to draw 1 surge. These are the surge cards. Add that to my stack of cards here as well. My opponent would do the exact same thing, and then we are set up to begin playing Tash Kalar.
I would have to say one thing I don't enjoy about this game is the components. I feel like the gameplay makes up for it, but I was surprised to see a thin cardboard board. The same cardboard makes up the pieces. And then on the cards, there's some characters where the females don't have hardly any clothes, and, their boobs are really hanging out all over the place. I don't want to see that.
I like the artwork.
Now this variant is called the high form. So the very first thing you're going to do is find an opponent that is both intelligent and classy.
Are you filming?
On your turn, you get to take 2 actions. The first action you get to choose from is simply placing a common piece on the board. So I'm going to take my piece and place it on the board, and notice I seem to be making a pattern. That's going to come into play next. One of your actions is to summon a being. Now I'm going to summon this assassin from my hand. So in order to do that, I see that I have the pattern. I go ahead and place this piece on the board. As you can see, she is a heroic piece. I place it in the square, the white square here. And now it says she can destroy any piece on the marked square. Notice how there's a marked square on this card. So I'm going to destroy this piece and send it back over to my opponent.
Another action you can take on your turn is discard. To be able to discard, you take one of your faction cards out of your hand and place it over into your discard pile. Now what you can do is you can select either, one or two of your other faction cards, and if you want you can get rid of them as well, but they actually go on the bottom of your faction deck in any order that you choose. Now what you're allowed to do as well is, let's say I do want to keep one legend card, okay? I can leave that face down, but I want to get rid of this legend card and this surge. So what I can do is go over to their respective decks and place those each on the bottom of each pile as such. And then what I can do then at the end of my turn is I get to draw up a new whole hand of 3 of my faction cards, another legend card because I've already got one, and a new surge. Now one thing about this game that I noted was that there's a total of 4 factions in this game, but 2 of them are exactly identical. And that is a bit of a negative. And though I do think that they all play very unique in their own way for the most part, we're going to need more in this game to keep it fresh and alive for the long run. More expansions with different factions so that we have more of a variety to choose from when we are choosing our armies.
In high form, you're going to score points by claiming task cards. Now these task cards will have different ways of claiming them. This one, for example, is line dominance, which has to do with your positioning on the board. Then we have this one, which has to do with summoning. And yet another task card which has to do with combat. And so why don't I demonstrate this one now? I have a card in my hand that I think I'm going to be able to summon and perform this action. So first, my first action, I'm going to place this on the board in order to make the correct pattern. Now I can play my knight. So I'm going to summon him to this position right here. Now his card says the knight may do up to 3 combat moves. You cannot destroy common pieces with these moves. So I'm going to take 3 combat moves. 1, 2, 3. I've now destroyed 3 pieces with my knight. So if I go over here, I see I can now claim this task card on the end of my turn. This does not count as an action. Now in the death duel and in the high form, you're creating patterns in order to summon beings. So that is a really unique mechanic that I really enjoy about this game. I mean, in a typical skirmish game, you might not be rolling dice, but you're still pretty much just playing a card that lets you do what you want, and you're not creating these patterns, and I really enjoy that aspect. I would have to say the high form is my favorite way of playing this game, because then I've got all the patterns on the task cards as well, and once I complete those, well, that's how you win.
Yeah, Carmen enjoys the high form, and that's all fine and dandy. But, in my opinion, it's good. Don't get me wrong, it is good. But the deathmatch duel is where it's at. I mean, just say deathmatch duel. I mean, guys are like, oh yeah, let's do this. We're deathmatch dueling. Because you only score points by defeating your opponent. You don't score points by, ooh, look at me, I created this little pattern on the board and I get to score 2 points. No. This is all about, I went out, I slaughtered you, and I'm getting me some points because of that. Now, if you check out the live play, we do an entire game of this, and you'll see that Carmen beat me, but at the same time, it's still my favorite because, in my opinion, this arena is supposed to be about combat. It's not supposed to be, hey, you stand over there and you stand over there. Hey, look, we win!
Now, we already went over summoning a being as one of our actions. In this case, I'm going to summon a legend. It's the same action, but it's a little more difficult, and this is why. On your legend card, you're going to see the pattern that you must complete actually includes upgraded or heroic pieces. I almost have this pattern, so on my turn, my first action is going to be to complete that by placing the common piece. Now I'm going to be able to summon the Leviathan, and I'm going to use this special piece here that shows he's a legend. And there's already a piece there on the square where he is summoned. Well, that doesn't matter. He actually destroys the piece that he's summoned on top of. Rawr! Now let's see what action I get to perform. Here it says either downgrade a connected group of up to 3 upgraded pieces or destroy a connected group of up to 4 common pieces. A group may have multiple colors. Well, in this case, we only have 2 players, so of course it's only going to be the 1 color. But look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4 connected pieces. I'm going to destroy them all.
Now, there's a catch-up mechanic that has been designed into the game, and it is called a surge. Surges are ways to try to, hopefully balance the game back in your favor, because things can get out of control sometimes on the board. This is a free action you get to use. So if you do this, you still get your normal 2 actions. And the way that these work is that there is a top and a bottom to the card. And what it's saying here at the top is that if you can meet this criteria, which in this case it's saying 4, your opponent has to have 4 more heroic pieces on the board than what you have. So let's look at the board and see if that's the case. If we look, red character only has 3 common, but yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, there are 4 upgraded pieces on the board, so therefore you would be able to perform the top portion of this card. But it doesn't stop there. The bottom of the card also says that if your opponent has, and it shows 5, what this is saying is as long as he's got 5 more pieces on the board than what you do, then you can use the bottom portion as well of this card. So if we look down at the board, we see blue has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and red has only 3, so therefore there are 5 more pieces. So if we look at the card, this will allow us then to use the top and the bottom of this card. Then it would be dismissed out of your hand or discarded over to the pile, and you would then be able to do whatever the actions say, then perform your 2 normal actions to end your turn.
Now, end game is triggered when someone draws the last of their deck, or when someone has 9 points at the end of any player's turn. Now, keep in mind the points are not just on the task cards you've collected during the game, but also due to legendary figures that you have on the board. So once you get 9 points, end game is triggered. The other person's going to get 1 more turn, and that's it. Count up your score.
So thanks for watching this episode of Games You Might Not Be Playing.
But you should.
Now, at the beginning of this video, you said you don't want to play a deck builder, you don't want to play a Euro, you don't want to play a dice rolling skirmish game, and this really isn't any of those now, is it?
No, it's not. It's not any of those. It's not even a card skirmish game. I mean, it's a completely different feel to it, and it's just totally refreshing. I mean, if I'm tired of playing the same old games all the time, this game is the one I think of.
Now, you guys may not be 100% aware, but we are not highly competitive people. We don't really care for games where I'm marching across the board and I'm destroying you. Now, we've tried those in the past.
Yeah.
And they typically end poorly for us.
I thought I was excited about those type of games because I really like the building your army up aspect, but I don't like the getting demolished aspect.
There's always that, yes. And that's why we usually steer towards Euro-style games as our game of choice. Worker placement, where it's like, yeah, I can block you, but I'm not destroying you. And there is a difference.
What's really neat about this game is that you've got the satisfaction because you're making these patterns on the board, you know, kind of like a Euro-style game because you are creating something, but at the same time, you do have the combat, so you're also demolishing your opponent. It puts 2 together.
So it's almost like a worker placement combat skirmish game. You know, I'm putting my workers out there on the board, they create this pattern, yeah, you work so hard, we're going to bring out this guy and destroy my opponent.
Yeah, and then it has the feel of a skirmish game. You've got the arena on the board, so that's nice too.
Now, you perform the high form, and we talked about this already a little bit. And I perform the deathmatch because I feel like if you're dealing with an arena game, you should be destroying your opponent. Now, you argue with me and say, but you are destroying your opponents to be able to perform some of these tasks, and that was demonstrated. Well, deliberately, we did that for the
It's not only to perform the tasks, but if you see your opponents getting close to, you know, getting a pattern on one of the task cards, then you can use your turn just to keep them from doing that. Just mess them all up, destroy all their pieces.
We've had a lot of fun with this game, and I'll be honest with you, I am not an abstract fan, and I don't think you really are either. I don't even think I asked you about that before this.
I noticed that it seemed like an abstract game when, you know, we first brought it out. We don't really play much of those. We're not really a fan of those usually. Yeah. Because this does have a theme, and you are in combat. You've got characters on your cards. So it doesn't. That's why it doesn't feel like an abstract so much.
I think it has enough fantasy mixed in with the combat system that you don't notice the abstract feel of it in the slightest. And that's what really surprised me because, no, I don't like abstract. And I don't like heavy combat style games, even though, you know, I went on my little rant about how I like the deathmatch duel. But what I'm getting at is that when her and I sit down and play, we like games that are more peaceful, and this one still fits that bill, oddly enough, it does. most of our games, it is about studying the board. It is about trying to create these patterns. And yeah, you are summoning your characters in the same time, but it doesn't feel like a violent action like what you do normally when you say, hey, you know, I marched over here. This is, okay, let me explain to you what I'm getting. I don't enjoy a lot of combat games where I set something up perfectly and it all comes down to the dice. And I've got a fistful of dice, I whiff, you know, HeroScape comes to mind, man. HeroScape comes to mind. I can't tell you how many times I had the high ground in HeroScape, and I go up there to take the kill, you know, just the killing blow, and I whiff on the dice.
It seemed like our favorite aspect of HeroScape was building the team.
And so that what this one has done is it still allows you that feel like, hey, I destroyed your pieces on the board, but it kind of incorporates almost like what you want to say, more so than an abstract, almost like a worker placement versus abstract.
Well, don't get us wrong. I mean, sometimes you have a pattern and you only need one more move to get your legendary figure, and your opponent completely decimates your pattern.
Why don't we talk about that real quick?
So there's a bit of frustration there sometimes.
Why don't we talk about that real quick? Now, that's a good point you brought up, because this game, you want to be careful about trying to plan too far ahead. Because typically, if you're planning even 2 steps ahead, 2 turns ahead, you're probably never going to get there.
Yeah.
Be very careful about that. I feel a lot of this game is about, now if you're going to do that, try to do it mainly away from your opponent if you are going to do that and create your patterns. The key to this game is when you see your opponent, they're over there trying to do their own thing and create their own pattern, you instinctively, you got to stop them. Yeah. Because they're about to do something bad to you, and you got to do something to put an end to it. So,
and if you don't stop them and you stay on your side of the board, oh boy, all of a sudden they just go gangbusters, and you just can't get caught up after that sometimes.
So this is a game where you want to make sure that the cards that you use them at the right time, and try to utilize them to their maximum. When we did the live play, like when I summoned the werewolf, if he would have summoned on a colored square, he could have been so much more powerful, but I didn't do that. So he was kind of weak, really, for the most part. So I didn't really utilize him properly.
Well, you know, sometimes I've found that summoning a legendary character is so difficult to begin with and then where they get summoned doesn't necessarily help me that much.
But like, they're still an obstacle.
They're going to attack all in a row, and there's none of my opponent's pieces in that row that they're going to attack. But yes, it is still worth it to summon them, because then it's really hard in order to get them out of the way.
Yeah, because there's
defeat them.
There's not very many cards or abilities that can get rid of a legendary piece that's on the board, so that is almost a permanent piece on the board that's never going to be removed, so you can start building around it.
Even if your legendary figure is not going to decimate your opponent, it's still worth it to still go through and build.
And he's a point regardless, and that's what you're trying to do here. So, all right, so, okay, so I think we covered everything here. Do we like the game? Do you like the game, and do you recommend it?
Yes, I do. I enjoy the game, and I recommend it because there's not, you can't really replace it with another game. So I highly recommend you at least try this out.
It has enough originality.
Exactly.
Okay. And that's what I was going to say, too, is that this does have enough originality. It has enough fun factor, enough enjoyability, and we can actually play this a little faster. The more we play, the quicker we're starting to see patterns on the board than what's demonstrated in our live play. I highly recommend it. I really do. And I think it is because I am so sick and tired of Dice Fest style games where I'm set up perfectly just to roll the dice and I whiff, that I really think that's what draws me. Now, I still do enjoy those games, don't get me wrong, but I think that's what I enjoy. This is a fresh breath of air right here.
Sometimes you just really get tired of the dice and you just don't want to see them anymore.
Okay, so a big 2 thumbs up from me. Thumbs up from her.
Yes.
We think that even if you do not want to run out and buy the game, definitely try whenever somebody has it available. Sit down and play it. Try to learn it. And I think that you'll see kind of what we are as well. And I know that a lot of reviews on this are mixed, but in my opinion, I think it's well worth it. So, anything else?
I think we've covered it. You should play this game.
So, let's just end there. My name is Tim Norse.
And I'm Carmen.
Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.